The Kryn outpost hung in space like a gutted carcass, its hull breached in a dozen places, its power core long since scavenged by someone with better equipment and worse ethics than Jason Reeves. He maneuvered his salvage vessel second chance closer, running scanners over the rotating hulk, looking for anything worth the fuel he'd burned getting here. Copper wiring, maybe some intact data cores if he was lucky. The Kryn had abandoned this station 3 weeks ago after losing a territorial pissing match with the Federated Colonies, and in his experience, warrior cultures didn't bother taking their trash when they left. Scanning complete, his ship's AI announced in its perpetually bored voice. Detecting residual power signatures in sectors 7 and 12. Probability of valuable salvage, 32%. Your optimism is inspiring, VERA, Jason muttered, pulling on his environment suit. The station's atmosphere had been vented, which meant he'd be working in vacuum. Again. Remind me why I'm doing this instead of taking that corporate job on Mars. Because you value independence over steady income, and possess what psychological profiles categorize as authority issues. I liked you better when you just said beep boop. He maglocked his boots to the station's outer hull and cut through a maintenance hatch with his plasma torch, the metal peeling back like burnt paper. The interior was dark, lit only by his helmet lamps and the occasional flicker of dying emergency lights. Kryn stations always felt too big, designed for a species that averaged 7 feet tall and considered cozy to be a design flaw. Sector 7 yielded exactly what he expected. Stripped clean except for some bolted-down equipment too heavy to move quickly. Jason worked methodically, harvesting what he could, his suit's exoskeleton doing most of the heavy lifting. He was 2 hours into the job, mentally calculating his profit margin, when VERA's voice crackled in his helmet. "Captain, I'm detecting an active power signature in sublevel 3. Biosignatures present." Jason froze, his hand still gripping a bundle of fiber optic cable. Biosignatures. The Kryn evacuated weeks ago. Confirmed. However, sensors indicate one life form, Kryn physiology, stationary position. Vital signs weak. Someone left behind. Jason's gut twisted with a familiar combination of anger and dread. Warrior cultures had a nasty habit of abandoning their wounded rather than wasting resources on anyone who couldn't fight. He'd seen it before with the Cartheks, found corpses left to die in their own bases because carrying them was inefficient. "Mark the location, I'm going down." "Captain, this violates salvage protocol. Interference with indigenous." VERA, shut up and mark the location. He found the access ladder to sublevel 3, the rungs bent and damaged, and descended in the eerie silence of vacuum. His helmet lamps cut through the darkness, revealing corridors that looked like they'd been abandoned in a hurry. Equipment scattered, personal items trampled, the universal signs of an evacuation that prioritized speed over dignity. The biosignature led him to what looked like a storage room, the door half open. He pushed through, his exoskeleton whining with the effort, and his lamps swept across the space revealing containers, broken furniture, and in the far corner, a cage. Not a holding cell, not a prison designed for dignity or even basic humanity. A cage, the kind you'd use for animals, constructed from energy bars that flickered weakly, barely maintaining their containment field. And inside, curled against the back wall, was a Kryn. She was small, far smaller than any Kryn he'd encountered. Where most of her species stood over 7 feet and built like biological tanks, she couldn't have been more than 5.5 feet, her frame slight enough that his brain initially categorized her as juvenile. But her face, gaunt and angular, held an age that contradicted that assessment. She wore rags that might have been clothing once, her gray skin marked with scars and the distinctive modeling of prolonged malnutrition. Her eyes opened as his lamps found her, violet, the signature Kryn eye color, but dull with exhaustion. She didn't move, didn't cry out, just watched him with the kind of resignation that made Jason's chest tighten. VERA, activate suit translator, Kryn dialect. Active, Captain. Jason approached the cage slowly, hands visible, trying to project non-threat despite being a human in full salvage gear that probably looked like combat armor to her. Hey, can you understand me? She blinked, slow and deliberate, but didn't respond. I'm not Kryn, I'm human. I'm not going to hurt you. He studied the energy bars, looking for a control panel. I'm going to get you out of there, okay? Just stay calm. He found the power relay, a crude setup that looked like it had been rigged in a hurry, and started working on it. The energy bars flickered more erratically, and he heard a sound from inside the cage, a sharp intake of breath that his translator rendered as pain. Almost there. Just hold on. His tools made quick work of the relay, years of salvage experience translating to steady hands and precise cuts. The energy bars died with a sound like breaking glass, and suddenly there was nothing between him and the Kryn girl except air. She tried to stand, got her legs under her, and immediately collapsed. Jason lunged forward, catching her before she hit the floor. She weighed almost nothing, all bone and wasted muscle, and up close he could see the extent of her injuries. Lash marks across her back, burned scars on her arms, and the deep bruising of someone who'd been beaten regularly. What the hell did they do to you? He whispered, knowing she probably couldn't understand. But she did respond, her voice a rasp that his translator struggled with. Weak, always weak, not worth resources. They left her here to die because she didn't meet their standards. The anger that flashed through Jason was hot enough that he had to take a breath, remind himself that getting angry wouldn't help her now. Well, you're worth my resources. Let's get you out of here. He lifted her carefully, her head lolling against his shoulder, and started back toward the access ladder. She whispered something else, too quiet for the translator to catch, and when he looked down, her violet eyes were studying his face with an intensity that seemed at odds with her physical state. Like she was trying to memorize him, like she couldn't quite believe he was real. Jason carried her through the dead station, past the evidence of a people who decided she wasn't worth saving, and brought her aboard the Second Chance. As the airlock cycled, an atmosphere flooded back in. As he removed his helmet, and she drew her first breath of clean air in who knew how long. He made a decision that probably violated a dozen regulations and would definitely complicate his simple salvage operation. But he'd found her in a cage, left to die like garbage, and he wouldn't walk away from that, even if it cost him everything. Some things were worth more than profit margins and salvage claims. Like proving that not everyone in this universe was willing to abandon the weak. The medical scanner beeped its assessment with the clinical detachment of a machine that had seen worse, but Jason's hands shook as he read the results. Severe malnutrition, dehydration at critical levels, 3 partially healed fractures that had set wrong, chronic vitamin deficiencies, and a laundry list of other problems that translated to years of systematic neglect. The Kryn girl, woman, he corrected himself. The scanner estimated her age at roughly 25 standard years, lay on his medbay cot, unconscious from the sedative he'd administered to keep her calm while the IV fluids did their work. VERA, pull up everything we have on Kryn physiology. I need to know what I'm dealing with. Accessing database. Captain, I must note that providing medical care to an alien species without proper certification violates. Add it to the list of things I'm doing wrong today. He adjusted the IV drip, checking her vitals on the monitor. Heart rate steady, respiration improving now that she had clean oxygen. Small victories. Just give me the data. The holographic display populated with information. Most of it academic papers written by xenobiologists with better credentials and less practical experience than Jason. Kryn were obligate carnivores, their bodies requiring high protein intake to maintain muscle mass. They had accelerated healing compared to humans but needed specific minerals, selenium, iron, zinc, in quantities that would kill most other species. Their culture valued physical strength above almost everything else, with social hierarchy determined by combat prowess and genetic fitness. And there, buried in a footnote of a paper about Kryn genetics, he found the relevant passage. Approximately 2% of Kryn are born below standard physical parameters, exhibiting reduced muscle density and frame size. These individuals, termed Venchal, roughly translated as genetic failure, are traditionally excluded from Kryn society and often subject to resource denial practices. Resource denial practices, the academic term for left in cages to die. Jason felt his jaw clench hard enough that his teeth ached. VRA, inventory our protein stores. I need to build a feeding plan that won't shock her system. We have approximately 14 kilograms of various protein sources. At recommended Kryn intake levels, that represents 9 days of supply for one individual. Then we're stopping at Meridian Station before heading back to Saul, added to the route. He pulled up the navigation charts, calculating fuel costs and time delays, and decided he didn't care. Money was replaceable. The life of someone the universe had decided to throw away wasn't. She woke 3 hours later, her violet eyes snapping open, with the sudden awareness of someone used to sleeping in dangerous places. Jason, who'd been dozing in the chair beside the medbay cot, jerked awake at the sound of her sharp breath. "Hey, easy, you're safe." He kept his voice low, non-threatening, hands visible. "You're on my ship. I'm Jason. Remember me." From the station, she stared at him, her expression cycling through confusion, fear, and then a blankness that was somehow worse than either. Like she'd learned emotions were dangerous to show. Her eyes tracked to the IV in her arm, the medical equipment, the small, clean space of the medbay. "Why?" The translator rendered her voice with a feminine tone, though the underlying Kryn language had a clicking quality that reminded Jason of insects. "Why take broken thing? You're not a thing, you're a person." He poured water into a cup, offered it to her. "And you're not broken, you're hurt. There's a difference." She didn't take the water, just watched him with that unsettling intensity. "Venchal. Genetic failure, not worth resources. They were correct to leave me." "They were wrong." Jason set the cup down within her reach. "Look, I don't know much about Kryn culture, but where I come from, we don't leave people in cages to die just because they don't meet some arbitrary standard of perfection." "Your people are foolish then. Waste of resources on weak." "Maybe, but we're alive and kicking, so maybe foolishness isn't such a bad survival strategy." He leaned back in his chair, trying to project casual friendliness despite the anger simmering in his gut. "What's your name? Or do I just keep calling you the person I found in a terrible cage?" She was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, barely a whisper, "Xenia." "Xenia, okay. Nice to meet you, Xenia. Now, here's the situation. You're severely malnourished, dehydrated, and have about a dozen medical problems that need addressing. I'm going to help you fix those problems, but I need you to work with me. That means eating, drinking, and not pulling out the IV that's currently keeping you alive. Can you do that?" "Why?" The question again, desperate this time. "Why waste on me?" Jason met her eyes, those violet depths that held too much pain for someone so young. "Because you're a person and people help each other. It's really that simple." It wasn't simple, of course. Nothing ever was. Over the following days, as the second chance made its way toward Meridian Station, Jason learned just how complicated saving someone could be. Xenia didn't trust easily, didn't trust at all, really, and every act of kindness seemed to confuse her more than comfort her. He'd bring her food, carefully prepared proteins and supplements, and she'd stare at it like he'd handed her a bomb. "It's just food, Xenia. You need to eat." "Why give food to Venchal?" "Because I'm a terrible businessman and I like wasting resources on people who need them." He sat across from her, the med bay having become their unofficial meeting space since she was still too weak to move around much. "Try it. I promise I'm not poisoning you." She ate slow and cautious, and he watched her eyes widen slightly at the taste. Probably the first decent meal she'd had in months, maybe years. The thought made him want to punch something, preferably the Kryn who'd put her in that cage. Good, he asked, is adequate, but she kept eating and that was answer enough. Days passed. Xenia grew stronger, the IV came out, her movements became less shaky. Jason found himself spending more time in the medbay than he intended, drawn by curiosity and something else he couldn't quite name. She asked questions about humans, about his ship, about why he salvaged dead stations, and he answered, keeping his tone light, occasionally throwing in jokes that his translator probably mangled but which sometimes made the corner of her mouth twitch. "You talk much," she observed one evening, watching him repair a power coupling while she sat on the medbay cot, her legs pulled up to her chest. "It's a gift, or a curse, depends who you ask. Kryn do not talk so much. Waste of breath. Well, humans waste breath professionally. We've turned it into an art form." He finished the coupling, wiped his hands on his pants. "Besides, I figure if I'm talking, I'm not leaving you alone with your thoughts, and your thoughts seem pretty dark." She was quiet then. "You are strange, Jason Reeves." "I prefer charmingly eccentric, but I'll take strange." He looked at her, really looked, and saw something different from the dying girl in the cage. Color in her cheeks, strength returning to her movements, and in her eyes a spark of something that might have been hope. "You're getting stronger." "Yes." She flexed her hand, studying her own fingers like they belonged to someone else. "Soon I will not need resources. Xenia, you're part of my crew now. You'll always have access to resources." She stared at him, and for the first time since he'd found her, she looked genuinely shocked. "Crew, but I am Venchal, broken. Weak. You survived years in a cage and you're still here. That's not weak. That's the strongest thing I can imagine." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, let me show you something." He led her to the observation deck, a generous term for the small viewport near the cockpit. Through it, space spread out in its infinite black, stars scattered like thrown diamonds. Xenia approached the window slowly, her reflection ghosting across the glass, thin, scarred, but undeniably alive. "That's what survival looks like," Jason said softly. "Not the biggest or strongest. Just the ones who keep going when everything says they should stop. You're not broken, Xenia. You're just not what they expected, and maybe that's better." She pressed her hand against the glass, her violet eyes reflecting starlight. When she spoke, her voice was thick with something his translator couldn't quite capture. "No one has ever been kind before you." Then they were all idiots. He stood beside her, two survivors looking at the universe that had tried to break them both. "Get used to kindness, Xenia. You're stuck with me now." She looked at him then, really looked, and Jason saw her memorizing his face again. But this time there was no resignation in her expression, just determination, fierce and bright. "Then I will become strong," she said, "for you, to protect you, because you gave me what my own people never did." "What's that?" "A reason to live." Meridian Station sprawled across the viewport like a mechanical city. All docking rings and habitat modules connected by transit tubes that glowed with interior lighting. Jason guided the second chance toward a berth in the commercial sector, trying to ignore the way Xenia had gone completely still beside him in the cockpit. She'd been improving steadily over the past 3 weeks, gaining weight and strength, even starting to smile at his worst jokes. But the prospect of being around other people had triggered something in her, a wariness that made her movements sharp and precise. "We'll just be here a few hours," he said, keeping his tone casual as the docking clamps engaged with a metallic thunk. "Resupply, file some paperwork, maybe grab something that isn't reconstituted protein paste. You can stay on the ship if you want." "No," her voice was firm, "I go with you." Jason turned to look at her, surprised. "Xenia, you don't have to." "I go with you," she repeated, and there was steel in her violet eyes that hadn't been there before. "You saved me. I protect you." "Okay, but stay close and let me do the talking. Meridian's not as rough as some stations, but it's not exactly friendly either." They disembarked together, and Jason was hyper-aware of the stares they attracted. A human salvage operator wasn't unusual, but a human traveling with a Kryn, especially one as small as Xenia, raised eyebrows and triggered whispered conversations. Xenia ignored all of it with a focus that was almost aggressive, her eyes constantly scanning for threats, her body positioned slightly in front of his as they walked. "You're taking this protection thing seriously," Jason murmured as they entered a supply depot. "Yes." No elaboration, just confirmation. He ordered supplies, proteins, medical supplies, replacement parts for the second chance's temperamental environmental system, and tried not to wince at the prices. Meridian charged premium rates for everything, but it beat the alternative of running out of air halfway to Sol. While the depot workers loaded everything onto cargo pallets, Jason noticed a group of rough-looking men watching them from across the bay. Pirates, probably, or independent contractors, which was often the same thing with better PR. 3 of them, all human, wearing the kind of mismatched armor that suggested they'd scavenged it from various sources. The leader, a tall man with facial tattoos and the build of someone who spent too much time in high-gravity training, pushed off from the wall he'd been leaning against and approached. "Reeves, right. Salvage operator out of Sol." Jason's hand drifted toward the pistol on his hip, subtle but ready. "That's me. Can I help you? Heard you made a claim on the Kryn outpost in Sector 7. That's interesting, because we had our eye on that site." The man smiled, showing teeth that had been replaced with metal implants. "Seems like maybe we should discuss sharing those salvage rights, or you could just transfer the claim to us and save everyone some trouble." The claims registered and legal, first come, first served. Jason kept his voice level, non-confrontational but firm. "You want salvage, there are plenty of other sites. But we want that one." The man's smile didn't waver. "See, we have a reputation to maintain. Can't have independent operators thinking they can just swoop in and take what we've marked." "You didn't mark anything. The station was abandoned and unclaimed when I arrived." "Details." The man's companions spread out, flanking positions, hands drifting toward weapons. Around them, other people in the depot had suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer that claim, and we're not going to make this a problem. Your little Kryn pet there can watch, learn how business works out here." Xenia moved before Jason could react, stepping fully in front of him with a speed that made the pirates flinch. Her voice when she spoke was completely calm. "You will not threaten him." The tattooed leader laughed. "That's cute. Your owner teach you to bark, little Venshal. We've dealt with Kryn before. You're not scary just because." He didn't finish the sentence because Xenia grabbed a cargo pallet, a pallet that probably weighed 200 pounds, loaded and threw it. Not pushed. Threw. The pallet hit the nearest pirate with enough force to send him sprawling across the deck, his armor cracking audibly. The other pirates went for their weapons, and Xenia moved like violence itself. Jason had seen Kryn fight in videos, graceful and brutal demonstrations of coordinated power. Xenia didn't fight like that. She fought like someone who'd learned to survive in a cage, using everything as a weapon, adapting to her smaller size by being faster, more vicious, more unpredictable. She used the depot's equipment, cargo hooks, support struts, the environment itself, and within 30 seconds all 3 pirates were on the ground, groaning. The tattooed leader tried to get up, and Xenia planted her boot on his chest, pressing down just enough to make breathing difficult. She leaned down, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent depot. "You will not threaten Jason Reeves. You will not approach him. You will leave this station and forget you saw us. If you do not, I will find you. I will remember your face, your smell, your voice, and I will show you what Venshal means when they have something worth protecting." She released him, and the 3 pirates scrambled away with the desperate speed of people who just learned an important lesson about underestimating opponents. The depot, which had gone completely silent during the fight, slowly resumed normal activity, though Jason caught several impressed looks thrown Xenia's way. He approached her carefully, keeping his movements slow. That was impressive. But they threatened you. She was breathing hard, her violet eyes still tracking the pirate's retreat. I will not allow that. I noticed you okay. She looked at him, really looked, and something in her expression cracked. I was weak. My whole life I was weak. They told me, showed me, proved it with pain and cages. But I am not weak when protecting you. I am strong. I am, her voice broke. I am worth something when I keep you safe. Jason felt his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and put his hand on her shoulder. Xenia, you were always worth something. Always. You didn't need to prove anything to me. I need to prove it to myself. She covered his hand with hers, her cool skin against his warmth. You gave me life. I give you protection. This is fair trade, yes. It's more than fair. He smiled, trying to lighten the moment. Though maybe next time we can resolve disputes with slightly less property damage. That pallet probably cost more than my ship. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, choked and uncertain, like she was still learning how. I will try, but I make no promises if they threaten you again. They finished their resupply and headed back to the ship, and Jason noticed the way people gave them space now. Word traveled fast on stations like this. The human with the scary Kryn protector. The salvage operator you didn't mess with. It would probably complicate future business, but watching Xenia walk beside him with new confidence in her stride, he decided it was worth it. Back aboard the Second Chance, after they'd secured the supplies and set course back towards Saul, Jason found Xenia in the cargo bay. She was training, lifting equipment, practicing movements, pushing her recovering body with the single-minded determination of someone trying to make up for lost time. You don't have to do this, he said from the doorway. Yes, I do. She didn't stop, didn't look at him. I must be strong, must be useful, must be worth the resources you spend on me. Xenia, my people said I was weak. They were right. She set down the weight she'd been lifting, finally turning to face him. But they were also wrong. I am weak compared to them, but I am strong enough for this. Strong enough to protect one foolish human who saves broken things. You're not broken. Then what am I? She moved closer, her violet eyes searching his face. What am I to you, Jason Reeves, project, rescued animal, crew member you took pity on? He met her gaze, holding it, and spoke the truth that had been building in him for weeks. You're the person who makes me remember why I started doing this in the first place. Why I salvage, why I help, why I give a damn about anything. You're proof that the universe isn't just cold math and survival of the fittest. You're Xenia, and that's enough. She was silent, and then to his surprise she smiled. A real smile, wide and genuine and transformative. Then I will be Xenia who protects Jason. This is good purpose, better than cage, better than dying. Much better, he agreed. And in that moment, standing in his cargo bay with a former prisoner who'd become something he didn't have words for yet, Jason Reeves realized that sometimes salvation worked both ways. You save someone, and they save you right back. The message from the Kryn hierarchy arrived exactly 47 days after Jason had found Xenia in that cage, transmitted on official channels with the kind of pompous formality that immediately set his teeth on edge. Vera, read it aloud in her neutral voice, while Jason was trying to fix the environmental recycler that had decided morning was a great time to develop opinions. Captain Reeves, you are hereby notified that the Kryn sovereignty has become aware of your illegal possession of Kryn citizen designated Xenia Venrash. As this individual was lawfully designated as resource insufficient and scheduled for natural termination, your interference constitutes theft of Kryn property and violation of 12 interspecies protocols. A diplomatic envoy will arrive at your registered location in 72 hours to retrieve the aforementioned property and discuss terms of your violation. Cooperation is expected. Message ends. Jason dropped his wrench, the clatter echoing through the engine room. They want her back. They left her to die and now they want her back. It appears so, Captain. Though I should note the message refers to her as property rather than a citizen, which suggests their legal interpretation is. I don't care about their legal interpretation. He grabbed the wrench, resisting the urge to throw it at something expensive. Where's Xenia? Cargo Bay. She has been training for the past 2 hours. He found her exactly where Vera said, moving through combat forms with liquid precision. Her body no longer the skeletal frame from the cage, but something powerful and purposeful. She'd gained muscle over the past weeks, filling out in ways that made her look less like a victim and more like exactly what she was, a survivor who decided to become dangerous. She noticed him immediately, reading something in his expression. What is wrong? The Kryn hierarchy sent a message. They want you back. Xenia went very still, her violet eyes fixing on him with an intensity that made the air feel heavy. What did you tell them? I haven't responded yet. I wanted to talk to you first. He moved closer, keeping his voice level despite the anger churning in his gut. They called you property, Xenia. Said your natural termination was lawful and I stole you. They are correct. Her voice was flat, emotionless. By Kryn law I am Venchal. I have no rights, no claim to resources or life. They left me in the cage because it was lawful to do so. That's the biggest load of garbage I've ever heard, and I've salvaged waste processing plants. It is their law. Then their law is wrong. Jason closed the distance between them, stopping just within arm's reach. Xenia, you don't have to go back. You're registered as my crew. We can claim asylum, refugee status, a dozen different legal protections. You have choices. Do I? She tilted her head, studying him. Or will they simply take me by force? The hierarchy does not negotiate with humans when Kryn property is involved. They will come, they will demand, and they will take. This is their way. Then we run. The second chance isn't fancy, but she's fast. We can disappear into deep space, find work in systems where the hierarchy doesn't have jurisdiction. You would give up your life, your business, your home, for Venchal. She moved closer, her hand coming up to touch his face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence he'd seen her capable of. Why, Jason? Why continue to waste resources on broken thing? Because you're not broken and you're not a thing. He caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. And because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a rescue project and became the most important person in my universe. So yeah, I'd give up everything before I'd let them put you back in a cage. Her eyes widened and he saw her processing his words, turning them over like precious gems she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. I am important to you. Xenia, you're everything. The Kryn envoy arrived exactly on schedule, their diplomatic shuttle docking with the second chance with the precise efficiency of a people who believed punctuality was a moral virtue. Jason met them in the airlock with Xenia at his side, refusing to hide her away like she was contraband they'd been caught smuggling. There were 3 of them, 2 warriors who stood over 7 feet tall and looked like they bench-pressed shuttles for fun, and a diplomat wearing elaborate robes that probably cost more than Jason's entire ship. The diplomat's eyes, a colder shade of violet than Xenia's, swept across Jason with dismissal before fixing on Xenia. Venrash, you will come with us. Your improper survival has created complications that require resolution. Xenia stepped forward, her posture straight, her voice carrying none of the submission Jason had heard in those first days. I am Xenia, crew of the second chance. I am not Kryn property. I am not returning. The diplomat's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise before settling back into disdain. You are Venchal. You have no right to refuse. Your genetic weakness disqualifies you from citizenship and self-determination. Come willingly or be taken by force. Try it, Jason said, stepping beside Xenia. She's claimed asylum under human law. She's a registered member of my crew with full rights and protections. You want her, you'll have to go through legal channels that will take years. Or we simply take her now. One of the warriors moved forward, reaching for Xenia, and that's when everything went sideways. Xenia moved like a striking snake, grabbing the warrior's extended arm and using his own momentum to flip him. Actually flip him, all 7 feet and probably 300 pounds of him, into the airlock wall. The impact was loud enough to make Jason's ears ring. The second warrior went for his weapon, and Xenia's hand was suddenly holding a plasma torch she'd palmed from her belt, the cutting flame igniting with a hiss. I said no. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. I chose this human. I chose this life. I chose to be Xenia who protects instead of Venchal who dies. You will not take that from me. The diplomat stared, his cold violet eyes showing genuine shock for the first time. You are combat capable. Yes, Xenia didn't lower the plasma torch. I am small, I am weak by your standards. But I am strong enough to protect what matters to me. Strong enough to fight warriors twice my size. Strong enough to prove that your definition of weakness was wrong. If you possessed such capability, why did you not demonstrate it before? Why accept the cage? Because I had nothing worth fighting for. Xenia's gaze didn't waver. No purpose. No reason. You taught me I was worthless and I believed you, but Jason Reeves taught me different. He taught me that strength is not just muscles and size. It is will. It is purpose. It is having someone who believes you deserve to live. The diplomat was silent, his expression cycling through emotions Jason couldn't fully read. Finally he spoke, his tone different, less arrogant, more calculating. You embarrass us, Venrash. Your survival when you should have died, your competence when you should have been helpless. It raises questions about our assessment procedures. Good. Xenia lowered the plasma torch but didn't extinguish it. Question your procedures. Question your laws. Question everything that led you to put living beings in cages and call it lawful. But do not question my choice. I am not returning, ever. The envoy left with threats that were mostly posturing, their diplomatic shuttle undocking with slightly less precision than their arrival. Jason watched them go from the cockpit, his heart still thundering from the confrontation, while Xenia stood beside him, silent and still. They'll be back, he said quietly, maybe with more warriors or legal challenges or... Let them come. Xenia's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that felt both natural and momentous. I am not afraid anymore. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything. You learned it yourself. No. She turned to face him fully, her violet eyes holding depths he was only beginning to understand. You gave me reason to learn. You gave me purpose. You gave me everything my own people said I did not deserve. You gave me life, Jason Reeves. And now I give you my loyalty, my protection, my... She paused, searching for words. My everything in return. This is fair trade. Jason felt something crack open in his chest, something warm and terrifying and wonderful all at once. More than fair. But Xenia, you don't owe me anything. You never did. I know. She smiled, that transformative expression that still surprised him every time. That is why I give it freely. Not because I owe you, but because I choose you. Every day I choose you. Is this acceptable? He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her smaller frame, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. More than acceptable, it's perfect. They stood there in the cockpit, 2 people who shouldn't have worked, Human and Kryn, salvage operator and former prisoner, 2 lives that had intersected in a cage and become something neither could have predicted. Outside, space spread infinite and uncaring, but inside the second chance, 2 souls had found what the universe tried to deny them both: purpose, belonging, home. Vera, Jason said, his voice muffled against Xenia's hair, plot a course for somewhere new. Somewhere they won't think to look for us. May I suggest the Outer Rim territories, Captain? Lower hierarchy presence, more independent systems, excellent opportunities for salvage operations with significantly less legal oversight. Perfect. And Vera, update crew manifest. Add Xenia as co-owner of the second chance. Equal shares, full partnership. Captain, that is highly irregular. She saved my life. She saved my sanity. She saved me in ways I'm still figuring out. She's earned it. Xenia pulled back enough to look at him, her eyes shimmering. Co-owner, but I was. You were someone the universe tried to break. Now you're someone who proved the universe wrong. Now you're my partner in every way that matters. He cupped her face gently, marveling at how far they'd both come from that cage in a dead station. So yeah, co-owner. Think you can handle it? She kissed him then, fierce and gentle and full of everything they'd both been afraid to name. When they finally broke apart, she was grinning, an expression that transformed her entire face, made her look young and hopeful and alive. I can handle anything, she said, as long as you are there to remind me I am worth the resources. Always, Jason promised and meant it with every part of himself. Always. The second chance turned toward the outer rim, carrying two survivors toward a future they'd build together. Behind them, the cage and the abandonment and the cruelty faded into memory. Ahead, possibility stretched infinite as starlight. And somewhere in the space between what had been and what would be, a human and a Kryn proved that compassion was the most revolutionary force in the universe. One act of kindness, changing two lives forever.